So as Bridget said, I'm going to talk to you about gender-affirming healthcare and some of the work that we do supporting young people and their families, and also highlighting some resources that are available to you in primary care as well, and some things that maybe you can do to support young people before they actually are able to access our service as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Centre for Youth Health and what we do there and our referral criteria. Talk through a few case studies which just highlight some things that can be done in primary care and some resources that you can access. Also a little bit about medications, just so that you've got some background knowledge, and point you in the direction of some further resources, not only for yourselves, but also things that you can direct young people and their families to as well. So at the Centre for Youth Health, we're a multidisciplinary team. So we have paediatricians and youth health specialists, nurses, nurse specialists, social workers, OTs, and a psychologist. And we're quite a big team at the moment, probably about 20 of us. And we provide gender-affirming holistic healthcare. So that includes helping a young person with the exploration around their gender identity, but also working with them around things like social transition, access to medications, and also surgery if that is part of their goal and their journey. And I guess the point I wanted to make is that, we don't see every young person who's exploring their gender identity, but it's more those young people who are requiring specialist medical support. So in Counties Manukau, we see young people from the age of 12 up to 24, and that's not only for gender-affirming healthcare, but also we run specialist adolescent clinics, do some work in alternative educations, and also see young people who are under the care of Oranga Tamariki for gateway assessments. Within Auckland DHB and Waitemata DHB, our criteria are slightly different, so we only see young people up to the age of 20, and that's only for gender-affirming healthcare. So if young people have other health needs, then we would need to refer them on to other services. We do see some younger children, so under the age of 12, but that's quite a small number. I guess the other thing I just wanted to highlight was that Auckland's sexual health services are also there for gender-affirming healthcare, and they see young people over the age of 18. So there is a little bit of a crossover between their service and our service, and I guess the point is that think about the young person you've got sitting in front of you when you're deciding where to make that referral to. If they're an 18-year-old and they're living a very adult life, they're very independent, they've got good support, then maybe Auckland Sexual Health is the better place for them to receive their care rather than our service. But we're always happy to have those discussions over the phone if you're wondering about where might be the best fit for a young person. I guess from our point of view, when we're triaging all our referrals, there are some things that it's really useful for us to know about. So what is that young person's chosen name and pronouns? Do they have support? Is that from family or from elsewhere? Who actually is aware of the referral, particularly if they're a young person who's still living at home? Are their family aware that you're making that referral? And who is the best person for us to contact about making an appointment? And I guess that's also around safety, around, who is aware of this. It's useful for us to know kind of what is your purpose or expectation of the referral. So what is that young person wanting? I guess a little bit of history around their gender identity. And are there any coexisting mental health concerns? So as Bridget has already highlighted, this group of young people do have high rates of mental health concerns, and it's really important that they're getting support for that as well. And as I said before, we're more than happy to discuss any referrals that you're thinking of putting our way. So this is a super busy slide and I'm not going to go through it all, but it just highlights some of the terminology that we often use that some of you will probably be very familiar with, some of you may be less familiar with. I guess that, when we're talking about a trans-feminine young person, which I will talk about with one of the cases, that's somebody who's been assigned male at birth but identifies as female or on the feminine spectrum, and then the opposite is true for a trans-masculine young person. And I'm not going to go through the rest of these, but it's there for your to take away with you. So the first case is an 8-year-old Māori child who was assigned male at birth and has been identifying as female since the age of 3, so since they were very young. And they've told their family that I'm a girl, I just am, this is me. And this has been insistent, consistent and persistent over time. They've always preferred to wear stereotypical female clothing and engage in stereotypical girls' activities at school. And they've got really good family support, and the school have been very supportive around their identity and social transition. So I guess the point with this case is that gender diversity is common in childhood, and that this is often quite fluid, so it's not necessarily the fact that if a child is presenting this way in childhood that it will continue on into adolescence and adulthood. The really important thing is that actually most younger children do not need to come to our service. They do not need medical or mental health support, but it's really around wraparound support and resources for families for them to be able to manage this and support their child both in the home and at school and in the wider community. Really, there are no medical interventions that need to take place before the time of puberty, and that may be when you might start to think about referring to our specialist services. And importantly, this should really be led by the child, not influenced by others around them, and that, it is okay for this to be fluid, for them to change their mind, and there is no harm from kind of changing their minds or detransitioning. So then moving on to our adolescents. So we've got a 16-year-old New Zealand European transmasculine young person. They've had an awareness of their gender identity for about a year now, initially identified as non-binary, but now transmasculine. And they're reporting gender dysphoria around periods, chest and voice. They're out to their friends at school, but not to their family. And they have reported some anxiety and low mood as well. There's some restriction around their eating, but they're not underweight. And they're wanting to access medical support, and they're thinking about maybe accessing hormones in the future. So importantly for this young person, they've got dysphoria around their periods. This is something that we can really easily provide some support for this young person for. And these can all be, most of these can actually be done in primary care as well, before a young person even gets to our service. All of this information is on the health pathways and also on the Hauora Tahini Health Point page as well. So some of the options that we have available include norethisterone, the combined pill, Depo-Provera. I guess when you're having discussions with young people, it's really important to think about whether or not they need contraception as well as period cessation, and so that may alter which options are available to them. Puberty blockers are not for every young transmasculine young person, and often that's something they may come to the clinic expressing, but actually we do have a lot of really other good options. We may consider it in younger adolescents or those who are within 2 years of attaining menarche. The other thing that's also really easy to support a young person with is around chest dysphoria and binding, and directing them as to where they can access a binder and how to do it safely. And there's some really good information from Rainbow Youth and also Gender Minorities Aotearoa. So for this young person, actually they were supported by their GP and the school to have discussions with their family and gain support from their family. The GP started them on Depo-Provera for period cessation, which was successful. They were able to change their name and gender on the school roll and connected up to the diversity group at school and also Rainbow Youth. And they were then referred to specialist services for when they were wanting to access further hormone treatment. The last case is a 14-year-old Samoan transfeminine young person who's had an awareness of their gender identity since early childhood. They've socially transitioned at school, there are no mental health concerns, and they've got good family support. And they're wanting information about how to access blockers and hormones. So we can use puberty blockers in this instance, and they are usually used from Tanner stage 2 or 3, and it's an injection given usually every 12 weeks. This will stop any further progression of puberty. We can't stop what has already started, but we can prevent any further masculinization, and it often relieves psychological distress. I think the main thing to point out is this is fully reversible. So if a young person starts a blocker and then this is not the journey for them, we can stop it and puberty would continue as if we had never used the medication. It is really important to discuss fertility preservation with young people before going on to medications, and this is fully funded by the DHB. There are some side effects listed there, the most common of which is probably hot flushes. And when we're talking about accessing hormones, this is usually around the age of 16, but it's very individualised for each young person. And the main thing is, are they able to give informed consent to access medications, and also do they have support around them as well? So our service supports a conversation with a mental health professional before anybody starts hormone treatment. And again, that's around capacity to consent, but also to make sure that they've got appropriate supports in place. And we obviously have written consent forms as well, which are available to you all to have a look at. Just very briefly, these are the expected effects that you can expect from estrogen. And I guess the main thing is that some of these effects are permanent. So if a young person did change their mind, particularly things like breast development, are permanent and would not be reversible. We have estrogen in the form of tablets and patches, and we increase the dose very gradually as we know we get better breast development. And young people do need to stay either on Leukerin or another anti-androgen unless they've had a gonadectomy. There are some side effects that we do counsel young people around, and there is regular monitoring that needs to take place, initially relatively frequently while we're increasing doses, but in the longer term, kind of 6 to 12 monthly blood pressures and blood tests. Also important that young people are enrolled in long-term screening programs as well. Again, just expected effects of testosterone and permanent irreversible features of testosterone include things like the changes to voice, hair growth, and changes to genitalia as well. Testosterone is given by an injection. There are various preparations, and again, we increase doses gradually. And if these young people are on a puberty blocker, that can usually stop once they're at full dose. Again, it's really important to think about contraceptive needs for these young people because testosterone is teratogenic, and we do a lot of work talking with young people about that. Again, side effects to monitor for, and I guess we do not know the long-term impact on fertility of these medications for these young people, and so it is important to have those discussions as well. So some resources of where you can go for further information. So there's a lot of very good information on the Auckland Regional Health Pathways under 2 different tabs there. There's also all of our information is kept on the Hauora Tahini webpage. There's further information on the Ministry of Health, where the guidelines are, that is where they sit. PATHA is the New Zealand Transgender Health Association, and there is a conference coming up in September. There's some other resources in the New Zealand Doctor Journal, and also some excellent podcasts on the Goodfellow unit. There's lots of resources out there for families as well. These are some of them. There are some online and face-to-face support groups, and some other resources here. And then also where to point young people to for support as well. So I've mentioned about school diversity groups, Rainbow Youth, Outline New Zealand also offer some specific counselling. There are various face-to-face groups that young people can also attend as well. So just to finish up that, I guess young people are the experts on their gender identity, and it's important to take the lead from them. I guess as Bridget was saying, how can you make your work environments welcoming for gender diverse young people? Really important to support both young people and their families, and there's a range of supports and resources out there for that. important to have a little bit of knowledge around hormones and puberty blockers, because that's often what young people will come in wanting to talk to you about, and knowing how and when to refer young people on to specialist services as well. That's it. Thank you.